the maracas, I go chick, chicky, boom, chick, chicky, boom.
Welcome to No Laughing Matter with Cuba Pete, a show that takes a critical look at the disparities between medical school education and society's growing healthcare inequities. Join Dr. Pedro Cuba Pete Greer each episode as he interviews the experts working to transform medical education and ensuring that future doctors are trained to provide equitable and compassionate healthcare for all communities. Dr. Greer received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2009, honoring his dedication to providing health care to underserved populations. As Dean of Roseman University College of Medicine in Las Vegas, Dr. Greer is committed to creating a medical school of the future where students embrace the need to unite the heart and science of healthcare. And now, the host of No Laughing Matter with Cuba Pete, Dr. Pedro Cuba Pete Greer.
Hi, I'm Pedro Jose Greer. They call me Joe, and welcome to Cuba Pete from Studio A in Las Vegas. This is our podcast, and it's No Laughing Matter. It's about the intersection of society, healthcare, health outcomes, and medical education as we're starting a new medical school down here, Roseman University College of Medicine. Today, I am thrilled, and you should be too, with our guest, Commissioner William O'Neil McCurdy. I've had the pleasure of meeting him, see what he does, how he does it. And the amazing thing to me is he's in the community every single moment. When there's an event, when there's things going on, when people need help, there he is. He was elected in 2020 to District D as a commissioner for the Clark County, and in January of this year became vice chair of the Board of County Commissioners. True? Congratulations, sir. Prior to that, he served 2 terms in the Nevada State Legislature from District 6. And this amazing gentleman was the youngest African-American, the first African-American and the youngest chair of the Nevada State Democratic Party. Congratulations. If that doesn't show leadership quality, then it might have been when he was student body president at the College of Southern Nevada. Now, having said that, it sounds like an easy thing to do. Get out of high school, go to college, end up with a great bachelor's degree from UNLV in a Bachelor's of Arts in Urban Studies. And, but his track wasn't all that easy. And your oldest child was born when you were in high school.
He was.
And what happened then?
Well, as soon as I found out that he was on the way, life changed for me quite swiftly. Within a matter of months, I found myself out of high school, looking for work and trying to figure out how I was going to provide for my son. So I got a job and started as, my first job was actually as a preparer at Pizza Hut, but I didn't stay there too long. And then went over ultimately to work as a pump repair technician at Ahern Rentals. And for a period of time, I got a chance to learn the ins and outs of the particular industry I was in at that time. And ultimately, that led me to going into construction, where I became an iron worker. And then I went over to the laborers union, where I became a construction foreman.
All the way from dropping out of high school to becoming a foreman.
That's right.
And all this to take care of your son.
Of course.
That tells you something really important about him. Commissioner, those are things called virtues. Something that, unfortunately, I see diminishing in our country and at least in my profession, medicine. We're not known as the most humble people in the world, or sometimes not as empathetic as we should be. But that is something that's incredible, that what you did, and then go back to college.
I did.
And to graduate, and then come back and serve not just your state, but your community. And at every single step of this, you have a leadership position. What do you see as the most pressing problems for our community?
I think there is a lack of investment in learning beyond the walls of the classroom. I believe that we need to have more educational opportunities in actual life. And what I mean by that is, it's one thing to sit in a classroom and, be taught by your teacher, right, the do's and don'ts and in the curriculum that's been set forth, but it's a completely different other opportunity that presents itself when you have opportunities to engage in potential careers beyond that educational setting. And in order for that to happen, we need to have more community partnerships with the private sector, as well as with governments. Because when you teach a child or a young person, teenager, what life could be like outside of that educational setting, you then spark an interest in allowing one to unleash their untapped potential. And for me, that happened 2 times before I got to college. It happened when I had an opportunity to work within a company called the Remax VIP Properties. And it was a program that was established by Clark County that would essentially allow students who are in high school to be paired with employers, and it allowed that student during the summertime to go and work in that industry. That was the first time that it created a spark within me for what I thought I wanted to do when I got older. The second time it happened was when I was actually, at this point, in college, at College of Southern Nevada. I had an opportunity to go on a trip to Washington, D.C., and we got a chance to sit down with congressional members and visit the Supreme Court. And while on that trip, I had an opportunity to sit down with a few professionals that worked in various industries on the Hill. And it was that second moment where I literally saw myself. I'm like, hey, I can do something like this. But if we have more opportunities provided for our children similar to those, I believe that we'll have a much stronger society. I believe that we'll have a much more educated society, and it allow for a more powerful positioning of our country.
I couldn't agree with you more wholeheartedly. I think there's a school here that does something similar to that, Cristo Rey.
Yes.
There was a famous American who once said, it's Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, never let your schooling interfere with your education. In other words, your formal education has really nothing to do with the real life education and the exposure you get. And we need to do something in this country. We need to do something like this in our community here. We need more physicians. Actually, we need almost 75% of all types of work in healthcare is underrepresented in this state.
It is.
And there's no reason it should be. We have so much to offer. And which goes back to, as we form a new medical school, we're not a traditional medical school. We're not here to produce the same type of doctors that we've been producing for generations. And the reason is our health outcomes are horrible. If you look at maternal mortality rates, we rank last of all industrialized nations. Unless you're African American, then it's 9 times higher. And if you're a Native American, it's actually 19 times higher, the morbidity and the mortality, the death of these women, which makes no sense. In a recent study shown that you have a longer survival in Haiti than you do if you're a Native American. And if you live in Mississippi, you live longer if you live in Bangladesh. Those are really embarrassing statistics as an American. And it's something that we have to change. And one of the ways that we want to change that is by how we educate the future workforce. And there's a thing that we refer to as the social determinants of health, which were the non-biologic causes of disease. 80% of diseases in this country do not have a biologic cause. It's a social cause. Whether it's diet, whether it's lack of education, lack of transportation, lack of employment. And the original term, which I think we should go back to, was actually the social determinants of inequality. And the things we need to address in society. How do we get a kid from the east side or the historic west side that comes from a family that's making less than average income, say they're making $45,000 a year for a family of 4. How do we get that kid the resources that they need? Which it becomes imperative to go to your plan. And if we could take care of all the things as you talked about, you wouldn't need as many doctors as you need. People would be healthier.
This is true.
And it goes along that way. Now, from what you've seen in the world, and you've seen a lot, if you were to come to us, starting a new medical school, what do we need to teach our young doctors?
First and foremost, I think that we have to make sure that our doctors are culturally competent. And they also need to be educated to understand the background that some of their clients come from, which leads to more cultural competency. But you can't be more culturally competent if you are not immersed in the community in which you wish to serve. So I believe that there also has to be intention on the university's part to make sure that the volunteerism of those prospective doctors starts early and often. I think that they should get out into the community to serve and try to understand the barriers that some of their potential future patients are already facing, particularly when you look at the youth. And when you look at how sometimes youth are diagnosed when, you know, they're older, when they reach these facilities, there are a lot of people right now today who may be adults that have undiagnosed ailments, whether it's undiagnosed mental health conditions or it's undiagnosed autism. The reality is that we have a population that are growing older that has not received adequate health care, which goes back to your equity in healthcare commenting to me.
It's not only are they growing older without health care, they're growing older with more comorbid diseases and suffering more. Even though African Americans and the Spanish are living longer, we're living longer sicker.
Right.
And we also have the highest rates of dementia and Alzheimer's. And why is that important? Because this country spends more money on dementia than we do on cancer and heart disease put together. A study that came out from RAND about 7-8 years ago, this was 7-8 years ago, that the average cost of a patient with dementia is $92,000 per year. You're talking about households that make half of that. And how do they take care of that family member? So what happens, as we've seen, guess what, kid? You got to stay home and take care of your aunt.
That's right.
Because we can't afford it any other way. And we have to come together and do that. And by the way, your words were, I thought you had read our curriculum, because we're not community engaged, we're community dependent.
Right.
We have a team called Genesis. And what we do is we created a method. We have Dr. Luther Brewster, who's our Senior Executive Dean for Community Health Innovations. It was the architect behind what we call household-centered care. We know that if you're an hourly worker and you come from a small company in particular, you have no benefits. So one day to go to the doctor means you make 20% less. So what do you sacrifice? Meals, rent, medications? Does it make sense to not only make 20% less and have to pay the exorbitant costs that a healthcare has, and then the insurance companies that don't pay full anything? They're not doing badly either. These insurance companies are making bucks. So what we do is we have right now over 90 households, over 300 household patients that we visit with an interdisciplinary team that takes care of identifying and mitigating the social determinants. Because think about it, if you're the head of a household and you're working an hourly job and your car breaks down and you have no credit card, you aren't calling Uber.
Right.
You aren't getting to work. So what does that mean? You could lose your job. And if you lose your job, what happens to the rest of the household? Or if you go to the doctor, we can't have those choices on society. So our students are ingrained in the community. As a matter of fact, community members that teach our students will get a faculty appointment from me, just like doctors that teach our students in the community. Everybody has to be treated equally.
Right.
And the lessons that they teach our students are immense, because the students are going to be taking care of these households for 4 years. They see what happens. They see the real interactions. They see that, hey, maybe the mammogram or the colonoscopy isn't that important if you can't afford to put food on the table.
Right.
You know.
Well, you know, in communities where I come from, you know, healthcare is a privilege. You know, you don't have the privilege like I can't afford to be sick.
Right.
You know, there were many days that I went to work knowing that I shouldn't have been at work, but at the end of the day, I just didn't have the privilege to actually allow myself to take in maybe the pain that I was feeling, the ailment that I had during that time. And that's another reality for so many. I can't afford the copay, right? I may have insurance, but it's so bad that if I got to spend $1,500 to be seen,
Right.
that's unobtainable for me. So I think we also should take a look at, you know, how we are educating ourselves about the foods that we eat. And
if we can have access to those foods, the cost of those foods.
to eat healthy is
not cheap.
is a cost.
Yep.
But like the little things, like sugars, you mentioned dementia. I've read an article that says, you know, maybe dementia is caused by the amount of sugar that we consume. And if that's a fact, I'm not, you know, I didn't research it myself, so I have to trust what I'm reading, and hopefully it's a scholarly article. Maybe I can reduce the amount of sugars that I intake, or maybe I can reduce the amount of salts that I intake.
And also by reducing the amount of sugar that you intake, you also protect your cardiovascular system.
Hey,
You know, your kidneys, your eyes, you name it.
this is true.
It's 100%. And that all goes back to exposure and education.
That's right.
That you were talking about. We have to stop living in the segregated society that we live in. And when I talk about segregation, it's not just a racial issue, it's a socioeconomic issue.
Yeah.
And the idea is the more somebody is exposed to something, the more, as you said, have choices.
Yeah.
At medical school, we have a program called Empowered, which is for opioid and stimulant use disorder, pregnant women and recent mothers. Why? Because it's a great need. And number two, it's important that the students learn social accountability. But having said that, you as an elected official with social policies and public policies have more influence on somebody's health than a doctor does.
Oh, yeah.
By having the appropriate education, transportation, living conditions, things of that nature, that if you really want to make America healthy, you really shouldn't be talking to doctors. We should be talking to individuals like you that do things like you.
Well, we have the unique ability to shape what our quality of life will be like. Mm-hmm. Whether we're looking at the infrastructure, whether we're looking at roads, whether we're looking at, you know, wider sidewalks, urban heat islands, how do we address those things to make sure that your life beyond being, you know, at the healthcare facility is you even have the ability to access it. So it's very important that when we're designing projects and we're meeting with, you know, the different developers, that we are being mindful of who's going to be the end user, you know, of the roads that we are paving, of the sidewalks that we are allowing you to have, and what width are those sidewalks? How many trees do you have on this development? Is there a green space for open seating and just being able to go out and, you know, just think and with shade? So there are many, many things that we can do from a policy perspective, but there are also many other things that we can do beyond just the infrastructure to include, you know, where are there grocery stores in this area? You know, am I going to allow 4 gas stations on an intersection, or I'm going to say, hey, maybe we should only have 2 gas stations on this intersection, and maybe we should also set aside, you know, some land for a potential grocery store, which would be a beautiful anchor tenant to, if there's in a community that is a food desert, to be able to allow access to fresh food. So it's very, very important that we have policymakers who are thinking through all of these different opportunities as we develop and, you know, try to create a community that everyone can thrive in.
It was a very interesting statistic that came out from the pandemic. Pedestrian deaths
Oh, yeah.
markedly increased, but they markedly increased in those of the lowest socioeconomic area, and that was because they had no cars. They had to walk.
So they're walking everywhere. So as a state lawmaker, or, you know, a local government, we have the unique ability to set speed limits. We have the ability to partner with our law enforcement officers to set up speeding zones to ticket those who are, excessively speeding, to get the attention of, drivers that will be, occupying that road, to let them know, like, hey, you speed over here, we're going to hit you with a ticket, and it's not going to be pretty. And also partnering with our school district to ensure that we have crossing guards, adequate crossing guards. And my good colleague, Commissioner Michael Naft, he has been leading the charge around pedestrian safety. And Clark County just actually allocated funds to partner and contract with the company to provide more crossing guards near our schools. You've also probably heard recently in the media and news that, our Sheriff McMahill wants to explore traffic cameras to decrease the amount of fatal accidents, but also before rolling this type of program out broadly, he proposed looking at, the highest impact intersections where we have the most fatalities and car crashes. And I think all of those proposals are good, and it speaks to what it means when you have leaders who are really concerned about the well-being of the citizenry. So it really matters that you have elected officials that are very focused on issues beyond just development, but how are we going to make sure that we create a quality of life for everyone to be able to participate in.
Well, Commissioner, you are, in my opinion, one of the perfect examples of a public servant. You're doing this for the right reason.
Right.
And you have had the experience in life to apply it to what you're doing, and your parents gave you the intellect to be able to process this and do something with that. And so I just got to say, I'm proud to be one of your constituents, number one. Thank you for what you're doing for our community, but most important, it's not what you're doing, it's the example that you are. And that becomes something that we don't say very often about elected officials.
That's right.
And it becomes really important. It goes back to what I said about you at the very beginning. You have the virtues. You're living it through, and you're doing something, and you're doing stuff that's exciting, and you're making it better. You do know you're going to have to come and speak to our medical students.
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay. So, and I know you got 2 kids.
Yeah.
Tell them if they want to go to medical school to talk to me.
I will.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's almost as rewarding as the work that you do. But a physician is here to serve, and that's what we need to continue doing. And I just can't wait to see what happens when you get out of law school.
You know what? I'm very much so looking forward to that day. And you asked me a question earlier. What is one of the greatest, travesties in society? And I think one of the greatest is that of unexpressed genius. When you don't have an ability to express who you are and to express the ideas that you may carry on a day-to-day basis in a setting that's conducive to you expressing those ideas and articulating those thoughts and presenting maybe some of the inventions that you may have been pondering about for those years, you begin to dampen the ability for society to grow exponentially. And it's very, very important that we have people that maintain a high level of integrity, a high level of sincerity, and to be the leaders that they were born to be. And one may ask, what is leadership? How do you define leadership? And to me, you define leadership by 2 words: by example. Oftentimes, people don't hear what you say. Sometimes your actions can speak so loud, I won't hear what you say. So if we live our lives in a way in which people can be inspired by, then we may ultimately start to create this infectious thing that goes out into our communities, into our society, into our country, and ultimately allow others to be impressed and try to tap into their own untapped potentials.
That's very profound, and I hope everybody got that message. There's a quote by C.S. Lewis on humility, and it says, humility is not thinking less of oneself. It's thinking of oneself less. And you're that perfect example.
Wow. C.S. Lewis.
Yes. And with that, Commissioner, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
But most importantly, thank you for what you do.
And thank you.
And listen, we're in this gig together. We're in the same valley.
That's right.
Let's make it better.
That's right. Let's make it better.
You got it. Thank you, sir.
Let's do the right thing. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe, like, and comment on your favorite podcast platform. If you'd like to support the groundbreaking work that Dr. Greer is doing at the Roseman University College of Medicine, please donate at the link below. Thanks for tuning in to No Laughing Matter with Cuba Pete, as together we work to unite the heart and science of healthcare to serve all in our communities. See you next time.